Hello and welcome. Russia isn't winning the war and Ukraine isn't losing. Given the facts in the way that they are, where could the Russia-Ukraine war go next? To talk about the biggest theme at the World Economic Forum in Davos, I'm joined by one of the world's most widely tracked columnists, winner of 3 Pulitzer Prizes, 7 New York Times bestsellers, Thomas Friedman. Thank you so much, and it's fantastic to have you back with us.
Rahul, great to be back with you.
The biggest conversation in Davos has been around the Russia-Ukraine war. At the end of this week, what's the impression that you're going away with after having spoken to everyone here, spoken to the Ukrainian leaders who are here, in terms of where this war could potentially go from here?
Well, I would say, Rahul, the war has reached what I would call its sumo wrestler phase. Okay, so after the original Russian invasion, then the Ukrainian counter-push, pushing them back. Now it's all basically focused in the east and the south, around Donetsk and Luhansk. And it's like two big sumo wrestlers now grinding and grunting up against each other to see the Ukrainians, can they push the Russians out? The Russians, can they completely consolidate their control of the east and the south so they would have a band stretching from Crimea back to Russia? And the outcome is still to be determined.
How long do you see this war going on for? It's impossible for anyone to know with certainty. But what do you think could be the next step? Because you've been writing a lot about the fear of escalation.
Well, no one knows, obviously, because so much depends on the pressures and counter-pressures on each side. Obviously, the Ukrainians, every day the war goes on, more Ukrainians are injured or killed, and more of Ukraine is destroyed. The longer the war goes on, the more of the Russian economy is damaged, the more Russia's brand globally is destroyed, and the more economic pain is inflicted on Russia, and the more Russian soldiers are killed and wounded. And so we're in that sumo phase of who's going to blink, who says uncle first, and I wouldn't predict.
So let's speak for a moment of the fear of escalation, especially nuclear escalation. We've seen a lot of nuclear rattling by Russian generals, their ministers, even Vladimir Putin himself. How worried are you about the fact that we could slip into nuclear territory?
Well, you have to be worried. This is the first war with a nuclear power, in modern Europe, and one doesn't know what a humiliated and desperate Putin would do if his forces actually were pushed back or his army began to fracture. I wouldn't rule out anything.
We've seen Europe consolidate in a way that Europe hasn't for a very long time. Do you see that continue? Because one of the big topics here has been whether Europe's consolidation will last or will it fragment again.
Well, one of my impressions here, like yours, Rahul, is one of the biggest, if I were to draw a picture of my time here, it would be of a fist called the European Union. And the EU members are saying, wow, is that us? Did we make that fist? Look at my fist, okay? And Putin's in Moscow saying, you made a fist, okay? But then everyone here is asking, how long will it last? Is it real or is it not? Is it solid or is it fragile? Nobody knows. But right now, one of the biggest new things out of this war is this EU fist. Wow. Who knows what will happen to it?
So there's so many imponderables, and one of those has been how President Biden has rallied America's cause. You wrote saying that you're impressed by how he's helped shape the Western alliance. Do you think he's coming in for unnecessary flack in terms of his handling of the situation?
I think President Biden's done a superb job of forging the Western alliance together. It's the best job any American president has done since George H.W. Bush in 1989 basically built an alliance to reunify Germany peacefully and bring the Soviet Union in for a soft landing. Biden's done a great job, but like everybody else, this is a long war. It's taxing, less so on Americans. It's literally for us just taxing. We're paying money, but we're not losing any lives. But it takes away from our domestic, focus, and we'll just have to see. I think if this is first semester, Biden gets an A.
The Ukrainians are offended by the question, but the yearning here seems to be that is enough effort being made towards peace. The rest of the world would like to find some way for Putin to get off the ramp and for this war to end. The Ukrainians, though, get very emotional when that is even suggested.
Yeah, it's their country, and we're people around here go around saying, well, you should give them this or give them that. I'd be offended too if people were bargaining away my country. my view is I'm ready to support the Ukrainians as long as they want to fight to restore their sovereignty, and I'm ready to support the Ukrainians the moment they say, you know what, we're going to have to negotiate. But to me, the Ukrainians should be taking the lead, and I'm not going to be giving them any advice in that department.
America's intelligence agencies have been giving tip-offs which have helped the Ukrainian army neutralize quite a few Russian generals. And you were concerned about the fact that this could possibly cross a red line. What's your sense of Putin's red lines as they stand in this moment?
Well, we don't really know. My concern is that I don't believe you should, be out there dancing around, proclaiming our role in assassinating, or not assassinating, in killing Russian generals or in sinking a Russian ship. When I grew up in Minnesota, we had a hockey announcer who I was very fond of, who used to end every game broadcast by saying, "When you lose, say little. When you win, say less. Good night and good sports." So I believe that's true in geopolitics as well. When you lose, say little. When you win, say less. Let the facts speak for themselves. I want to help the Ukrainians recover their sovereignty from wherever they are now, right up to the border, but not beyond that. I have no agenda for taking Putin down, for fragmenting Russia. Russia is a country that spans 11 time zones. I want to be very careful about unraveling it on our part, doing anything we would do. That's not my objective. My objective is to restore the principle of the sovereignty of borders, and that no state can wake up one day and say, I think I'd like to rape my neighbor. That's what Putin did.
Your reading of how much in control Putin is of the Russian state, and whether he still speaks for the entire Russian state, or is there a growing sense among some Russian elites that it's possibly better to find somebody else who could do this?
That I don't know, Rahul. There's really no sign of it. He's got such a tight control over the press, but we do see a Russian diplomat quitting. We've seen reporters, suddenly breaking out with the truth. So it's very hard to know. One of the hardest things for a news person in covering this war, and when it just started, people would ask me, where should you be? And I would ask myself, should I be in Moscow? Should I be in Kyiv? Should I be in Lviv? Should I be in Warsaw? Should I be in Berlin? Should I be in Washington? And I came to the conclusion, as a reporter, there's only one place you want to be to cover this war. There's only one place that matters, in Vladimir Putin's head, because that's the only place that matters. This war emerges entirely out of his head. And the reason we all struggle to ask the questions you've asked is because none of us are in his head.
But I heard Alexander Stubb, a big voice in EU, say Western media is trying way too much to get into Putin's head, and this psychoanalysis is good for columnists like you. It's meaningless because you're almost making it seem as if Putin is an irrational actor, whereas he's not, and he's convinced, his people are convinced that he's acting in the best interest of the Russian state.
Well, again, what his people think, I don't think any of us know. This is a completely controlled society, And people tell me, well, but they took polls. Yeah, imagine you're a Russian in Moscow. Some guy calls you on the phone and says, what do you think of Vladimir Putin? Oh, I think he's doing a terrible job. Yeah, how do you spell your name? Ivan Ivanovich. Okay, so I don't believe any of that. That's all garbage. And everybody else, I'm not trying to psychoanalyze Putin. I'm only watching what he's doing on the ground. That's the only way to understand what is in his head.
For a moment, if we were to step away from Moscow to Beijing, these zero COVID lockdowns are creating a lot of economic turmoil. Some say, as I heard last night, that China's state is so powerful and resilient, they'll pull through this. Some say, could this be the beginning of the unraveling of the Xi regime? How do you read it?
Yeah, I just have no idea. All I know is what they're doing, it's very hard to see how it can succeed, because basically what China is doing is taking on Mother Nature. China's basically said, I'm going to have a national strategy for a global pandemic. Well, good luck with that. It worked as long as their vaccine worked against the Delta variant, but their vaccine is completely ineffective, virtually ineffective against Omicron. So none of their people are really vaccinated. Meanwhile, because they use this strategy of locking down everything and chasing everyone who had it, no one has herd immunity. So in America, our crazy way of doing things, and it was crazy, ended up actually serving us, because half the people didn't believe in wearing masks, so they just went out and got the disease and got native immunity, and half the people were smart enough to get a vaccine and are now at least vaccinated, so they're protected against severe disease. And as a result, we're living with the virus. Not perfectly, not ideally, but we can live with it. China has no one with herd immunity, basically. And so to get from where they are now to where they have some kind of herd immunity, they either have to vaccinate 1.4 billion people with a vaccine that works.
But they don't want to buy international vaccines.
So they want to
have a big
develop
Communist
their own.
Party Congress happening.
Yeah.
She's up for re-election.
Yeah.
And he's made it a matter of national pride. All of it very, very dangerous
Yeah,
cocktail.
well, maybe we have to get past their equivalent of a national election, their party Congress, for them to change policy. But I don't see how they can go along like this, just constantly chasing the virus.
Because you write a lot on mankind taking on Mother Nature,
Yeah.
and how that never ends well. And for some reason, they don't seem to understand that you can't win against Mother Nature. You can't lock down the virus.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this before, probably on India Today, that when you're up against Mother Nature, all you can do is adapt. That's all you can do, because Mother Nature is just chemistry, biology, and physics. That's all she is. You can't talk her up. You can't talk her down. You can't say, Mother Nature, we're having a bad month in India right now. Could you go easy on us? And so all she's interested in is, what is your adaptation strategy? If your strategy is to deny the virus, she's going to hurt you or someone you love. If your strategy is built on chemistry, biology, and physics as a response, you'll do well. If your strategy is to time your response to a political election, she'll hurt you or someone you love.
Do you think this war and the world's response to the war has increased or decreased the chances of China invading Taiwan?
Oh, I definitely think it's decreased. Seeing how many businesses have so rapidly moved out of Russia has to have been sobering for China. China's leadership has to be asking, is our army like the Russian army? Do our guns work as poorly as their guns? And let's remember, China's not fought a war since the war with Vietnam, basically, and didn't actually do very well. So it turns out that actually experience, and coordination and logistics and all those things that go into modern warfare really matter. And so if you haven't fought a war in a long time, you really don't have all those instincts. And I hope China doesn't do anything like that, invade Taiwan. It wouldn't be good for China. It wouldn't be good for Taiwan. I don't know what would happen militarily. I'd make no predictions. But I think this has been sobering for China when it comes to that issue.
Are you seeing the current American administration being able to work closer together with the Chinese, or do you see Washington and Beijing moving further apart?
Right now, they're not moving either closer together or further apart, but they're now further apart. So that means the breach is not being filled. We have a problem there. There's been a breakdown, basically. They still talk to each other, but in terms of the whole U.S.-China economic relationship, and therefore the diplomatic and strategic relationship, I'm very worried about it. I personally don't like to use the term China. I much prefer 1/5 of humanity who speak Chinese. Let's keep the scale in mind. So before you say, let's go to war with those guys, let's push those guys around, let's freeze those guys out, let's teach them a lesson. Always remember, you're talking about 1 out of every 5 people out there who speak Chinese. The scale is enormous. So don't play with big systems. This is a big system. Don't play around with this.
But they're getting blocked out of an international conversation currently because of COVID and lockdowns. But there used to be a big Chinese splash.
Yeah.
Now, increasingly, there is the United States, there's India, there's Europe,
Yeah.
there's Africa. But you aren't hearing and seeing China.
You aren't hearing or seeing them, but they haven't gone away, Rahul. Yeah, it's still there. So that isn't advice to give in to every demand of China. It's simply advice to take China seriously. And be careful about how you talk about doing this or that to 1 out of every 5 people on the planet who speak Chinese.
How do you see this crisis is likely to play out from an Indian perspective? And what's your reading? India made a big splash here at Davos, whether it's the Indian states, the government, inside, outside on the promenade. What is it that you're picking up and thinking about?
India's not central to this story.
Sure.
It stayed neutral. People understand. I mean, all your weaponry comes from Russia. India's not central to this story right now. People understand that India gets all its arms from Russia. It was a big supplier of wheat. It's had a long-standing relationship. So there's understanding on that side. At the same time, India, historically, as a leader of the third world, has always had a strong moral voice, which is now silent on the fact that Russia has decided to rape its neighbor, unprovoked. And to be silent on that is, it's not the India that I tend to think of, and so I think it's got to reflect on it's got these counter pulls and tugs.
From an Indian perspective, Delhi would say we're not silent, we've condemned the war, but we don't want to take a side like Tom would want us to, because when it comes to America's national interests in Iraq, Afghanistan, DC does what DC wants to do, regardless of how it impacts India and the rest of the world, and in this case, so should India. And we're not silent, we're saying what we want to, you're only hearing what you want to hear, Tom.
That's very good. You're a very good spokesman for the government.
No, I'm just asking a question.
And I actually buy that. You don't see me writing condemning India. I'm just saying India has formally, I know, spoken out against it, and that's good. Look, my net is India is not central to this story. Sure. As long as it, how did it vote in the UN?
Nice, abstain.
It abstained. So I wouldn't call it then condemning. It abstained on a pretty big moral principle. But I also understand that you get your weapons and the big trading and food relationship with Russia. India is just not central to the story right now. Even if India decided to be super aggressive against Russia, it wouldn't tip this thing one way or another. So I don't spend a lot of time worrying about the Indian position right now, not because I don't care, but I just don't think it's central to the story right now.
What's your reading of how American politics is like to play itself out in the next couple of years? There's a lot of concern about whether Donald Trump could come back, or somebody who thinks and acts like Donald Trump.
Well, I share that concern of either Trump or someone who's imitating Trump. I have no idea. This thing's going to go 10 different ways, between now and then, and so I make no predictions. I have no idea where it's going to go. Our politics is extremely volatile. You wouldn't understand that in India. We have very stable politics, but ours is our state-to-state politics is very stable. It's very unstable.
So, but what's your sense of how this is likely to play out, and the manner in which forces are playing themselves out right now? Do you think that they're increasing the prospects, possibly, of Trump-like persona, or maybe Trump himself coming back to power? I
think Trump, if you're betting, you would bet that he will run again. But there could be real opposition. Someone may choose to take him on in the primary. You could have real opposition. On the Democratic side, it's wide open. President Biden is not getting any younger. A lot of people have zero confidence in Kamala Harris as his successor. So on both sides, you have very unstable chemicals, and it's not clear who will emerge, who the 2024 ticket will be.
And what is your biggest takeaway from Davos? Like, this happened in the summer, not in the winter. At the end of the week, what is it that you're taking away from here?
I'm taking away where we started, that I think there's a lot of unprecedented European EU collaboration, not just economic, but military and strategic. But a lot of concern among Europeans of whether that will hold, and a lot of people in the developing world, whether it's from India or Africa, really saying what you said, Rahul, which is that you want me to worry about these refugees, but you never worry about our refugees. You want to welcome Ukrainian refugees, but people who look like me, who are the same color skin as me, are living under bridges in Europe, and no one's doing a worldwide campaign for them. And so there's that kind of push and pull.
And what would you be forecasting and looking out for? So if you were looking out into the future from here in terms of where things are, what would be the trends that you'd be looking out for most
The
carefully?
only thing I'm looking at is what will be the outcome of that sumo wrestling match now in eastern Ukraine, because that will decide. Everything will flow from that. And the other thing I'm watching is what's going on inside Russia, because the most uncovered but important story here is what happens when Ivan Ivanovich goes to his ATM machine and takes out money, or there is no money, or doesn't get a paycheck, or his factory has to close because it's got no microchips, or he can't fly from Moscow to Vladivostok because all the planes have lost their spare parts. We're not seeing that part of the story. And so it's very hard to know what the full pressures are on the other sumo wrestler.
Well, you always have very fascinating insights on questions which nobody has clear answers to, and it's been fascinating talking to you. So thank you so much, Mr. Friedman, for your time. Wish you all the best.
Thanks, Rahul.
Take
Pleasure.
care. Thank you so much.